Göbekli Tepe is almost 12,000 years old. For a long time, we had a simple explanation of why something that old could exist at all. Hunter-gatherers came here from different places. They built these huge stone structures to hold rituals. They feasted together and then they left. So Göbekli Tepe was a temple. That was the answer for years. Then the digging turned up something that doesn't fit. Archaeologists have found houses here. They have found thousands of stone tools used to grind wild wheat and barley. And they have found large stone containers that point to something stranger: beer. Why would anyone brew beer in a temple? Göbekli Tepe isn't the only site raising this question. Across the same region, archaeologists keep finding other settlements built by people who shared the same way of life. And if these people were already settled, then farming can't be the thing that settled them. The order is backwards. So the real question isn't only who stacked these stones, it's who was already living here 12,000 years ago and what happened to them after Göbekli Tepe. The temple idea didn't come from nowhere. When Klaus Schmidt started digging at Göbekli Tepe, what he found looked nothing like ordinary houses. He found huge T-shaped pillars, animals carved into the stone, massive circular enclosures, and piles of butchered wild animal bones, which his team read as leftovers of big shared feasts. So the idea made sense. People came here for rituals, ate together, built these enormous structures side by side, and then went home. Fine, call the central enclosure temples, and I'll give them that. But Schmidt was saying something bigger. He was saying Göbekli Tepe was a ritual site, not a place where people actually lived. And later digging showed that it wasn't true. The team working at Göbekli Tepe now says the building without T-shaped pillars aren't the odd ones out. They are most of the sites. Most of what's been dug is not temple at all. It's housing. And their conclusion is blunt. People didn't visit Göbekli Tepe. They lived here for whole 1750 years the site was in use. So the monument can still be ritual, but Göbekli Tepe itself can't just be a temple. It was a place where people lived with their huge sharing spaces built right into it. So who were they? Look at the food. Göbekli Tepe has produced more than 7,000 grinding tools. When you look at the wear on them and the tiny plant remains left behind, you can see cereals were being processed here, not in small amounts, on a large scale. And then there are the stone containers. Some of them could have held more than 100 liters of liquid. And in 2012, Oliver Dietrich, Klaus Schmidt, and their team laid out what they thought was happening over here. These gatherings included beer, brewed from grain left to ferment. And this is the part that matters more than the pillars. You can't just throw a gathering like this together. Someone had to collect the grains and process it. Fermentation takes time. Days, not minutes. If a crowd is coming, the food and the drink have to be ready before they arrive. So someone knew that people were coming. Someone planned for it in advance. Moving stone shows that you can build. Preparing food and drinks for a crowd on a schedule shows that you can organize people. These people were doing both 12,000 years ago. So now I want you to stop staring at the monument and look at the society which is capable of pulling this off. Göbekli Tepe wasn't standing on its own. Across this region, archaeologists are finding other settlements from the same world. Karahantepe, Sayburç, Çakmaktepe, different communities but the same pillar, the same kind of symbols, the same shared buildings. We find even the same stories carried from one place to the next. So these people were passing knowledge between them. But one thing here changes it for me. People lived at Göbekli Tepe for around 1750 years. That's not a group that settles for a few generations and drifts apart. That's roughly 60 generations keeping the same world alive. Every one of those generations had to teach the next how to build, how to cut and shape stone, how to organize a crowd, what the symbols meant and what the stories meant. And that knowledge was held for centuries. Now look at what is happening here. This is a fertile crescent, the same region where farming begins. So farming wasn't some invention that showed up later and taught these people to settle down. They were already settled, that's why they got farming. They were living like this while the people here were still moving from gathering white cereals to planting them and eventually to farming them properly. So now this is no longer a strange monument sitting before civilization. This is a proof of the civilization starting. We just didn't recognize it. People settle down, they pass their knowledge, they stay in contact with each other, and slowly the way they feed themselves changes. And over enough generations, that becomes the civilization we already know. But this world didn't last. And when you look at how it ended, the simple version stops working. The standard explanation for the ending is simple enough. At Karahantepe, buildings were deliberately filled in and closed once people stopped using them. Göbekli Tepe shows the same odd habit. Monumental buildings buried on purpose. So maybe the story just changed. People moved on, and before they left, they closed down the places that had mattered to them. That works until you look at one room that was dug at Karahantepe in 2015. Archaeologists call it a domestic building, a place where people lived. Inside were 3 surviving T-shaped pillars, and one of them had something never seen on one of these pillars before. It had a human face, deep set eyes, a carved nose. The first time one of these pillars is given the face of a real person. When I looked at the room, I see that the work stopped because 3 pillars inside an ordinary living space, one of them being given a face, the others left plain. To me, that doesn't look like a finished room. It looks like a room where their pillars were still being worked on when everyone left. And that matters because of what's around it. Elsewhere at Karahantepe, there are broken T-shaped pillars, damaged buildings, and clear signs of burning. Something interrupted them mid-work. But the question is, what? And I can see 2 serious possibilities. Either something sudden hit them and forced them out, or someone else came. I think conflict is worth taking seriously here. Because if another group did attack Karahantepe, we are not inventing some enemy out of thin air. This world was already bigger than Taş Tepeler. Across southeastern Anatolia and northern Mesopotamia, settled communities were turning up across a wide area. There were other organized groups of people out there with their own places and their own interest. So if even one of those groups came into conflict with the communities of Taş Tepeler, the end of this world looks the way it does. Maybe some buildings were buried by people trying to protect them. Maybe others were smashed. Göbekli Tepe was sealed and Karahantepe was left broken because we are seeing 2 different reactions to the same crisis. I can't prove anyone was attacked, but when I pull it all together, the work that stops midway, the destruction, the burying, I don't see a society that got bored and just wandered off. I see that there was trouble. Whatever happened, by the end of the period, the people who built Göbekli Tepe were gone from these hills, which leaves one question. Where did they go? So we can't follow one family out of Göbekli Tepe across the next 6,000 years. That evidence actually doesn't exist, and I'm not going to pretend that it does. But we are not completely in the dark about where they went. Across the Fertile Crescent, farming communities spread, people move, populations mix, and far to the south along the Tigris and the Euphrates, villages started to grow into towns, and then into cities, and finally into the Sumerian civilization. Now, I'm not saying that the people of Göbekli Tepe became Sumerians. Nope. What I'm saying is that by the time Sumer shows up, none of the hard parts are new. People had already been living in permanent communities for thousands of years. They knew how to organize large number of people. They were passing knowledge down from generations, sharing the same symbols and the stories, and changing the way they grew their food. So Sumer didn't build all of that from nothing. And we know that people were moving across these regions. Here is a study. In 2025, scientists recovered the first complete genome from an Egyptian man who lived around the time the pyramids were beginning to be built. Most of the ancestry was north, but about a fifth of it traced back to the people from the eastern Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia, and the land around it. That doesn't make him a Sumerian. It doesn't tie Egyptians directly to Göbekli Tepe, but it tells you that these worlds weren't sealed off from each other. They were moving between them. So here's what I actually take from this. I don't think Göbekli Tepe is the leftover of some lost advanced civilization. I think it's showing us something better. Civilization didn't switch on with the first city. Long before that, people had already spent thousands of years learning to live together, organize themselves, hold on to knowledge, and change how they fed themselves. Göbekli Tepe lets us watch one of these chapters of history. But there's one part that I left open on purpose. Sumer. And you forget the Anunnaki for a minute. Here's the real question. Who were the Sumerians before Sumer? Where did they come from? What was in Mesopotamia before the first cities, and how much of that older world carried into the new one? That's its own investigation, and it's the one I want to make next. So if you want to come with me for it, you can subscribe now so that you don't miss it. This is it from my side today. This is Harry signing off. Stay curious.